Salespeople humiliated the customer without knowing he was the store owner. He changed everything. David Thompson took a deep breath before pushing the glass door of the boutique in the most elegant mall in New York City. His hands trembled slightly as he held the strap of his worn-out backpack, but he knew he had to make that visit. He had barely taken 2 steps inside the store when he felt the stares. Jessica, the long-haired blonde saleswoman, stopped organizing clothes on the racks and exchanged a meaningful look with her colleague Michael, who stood behind the counter. The smile she had maintained for other customers vanished instantly. "Can I help you?" Jessica asked, but her tone lacked the same friendliness David had heard her use with the previous customer. "Good morning. I'd like to see some suits, please," David replied politely, walking toward the men's section. Jessica and Michael exchanged another glance. David's simple outfit, his worn backpack, and the way he spoke didn't match the usual profile of customers at this high-end store. "Sir, this section is for—" Jessica hesitated, searching for the right words. "Customers who make larger purchases. Maybe you'd prefer to look at other stores in the mall." David felt heat rise up his neck but kept his composure. At 42, he had faced similar situations more times than he cared to remember. "I understand, but I'd really like to see the suits. I'm looking for something specific." Michael stepped forward, crossing his arms. He was a young man around 25, with neatly styled brown hair and an expression that didn't hide his discomfort. "Look, buddy, we don't mean to be rude, but these suits start at $3,000. Are you sure that's what you're looking for?" David's embarrassment grew when he noticed other customers starting to pay attention to the conversation. An elegant woman trying on a coat paused to watch, as did a young couple browsing the women's section. "Yes, I'm sure," David replied, trying to maintain his dignity. Jessica sighed dramatically and slowly walked toward the suits, as if doing him a huge favor. "Fine. What size do you wear?" 52. She grabbed the first suit she found in that size, a dark gray model, and held it carelessly. "This one is $4,200. Cash." David examined the piece carefully, running his fingers over the fabric. "It's nice. Could I see other models as well?" "Other models?" Michael cut in, stepping closer. "Buddy, this one's already expensive. I don't know if it's worth wasting time." "Michael's right," Jessica agreed. "Besides, we have other customers to help." In reality, the store was practically empty, with only 2 other customers present. David noticed the lie, but chose not to confront it. "I see. May I at least try this one on?" The 2 salespeople exchanged another look. Jessica seemed reluctant. "The fitting room is under maintenance right now." David glanced toward the fitting rooms and saw clearly there was no issue. In fact, just minutes earlier, he had watched the elegant woman step out of one. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. The tension in the store was palpable. David felt he was being tested in some way but couldn't fully understand why. He had deliberately chosen to wear simple clothes that day, but hadn't expected such a hostile reception. "All right," he said, handing the suit back to Jessica. "Maybe I'll come back another time." "That would be better indeed," Michael murmured, low enough that only Jessica could hear, but David caught the words. At that moment, a woman around 60 years old entered the store. She was elegant, well-dressed, and carried a recognizable designer bag. Immediately, Jessica and Michael transformed. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Jessica exclaimed with a radiant smile. "How may I assist you today?" "I'm looking for something special for a party," the woman replied. "Perfect. We have the most beautiful pieces from the new collection. Please, follow me." David observed the drastic change in the sales associate's behavior. The difference in treatment was so obvious that even other customers began to notice. The lady who had witnessed the earlier situation shook her head in disapproval. As Jessica guided the new client through the store's most expensive pieces, enthusiastically explaining every detail, David remained standing near the suits. He took a small notebook from his backpack and began jotting down some notes. "What are you writing there?" Michael asked, approaching with suspicion. "Just some personal observations," David replied calmly. "What kind of observations?" David closed the notebook without answering. Michael was clearly bothered but didn't press further. Instead, he started following David around the store, keeping a distance that made it obvious he was watching him. The situation grew even more awkward when Jessica, after finishing with the VIP client, returned and began asking seemingly innocent questions, though David could tell they were attempts to figure out if he could actually afford anything in the store. "Do you work around here?" she asked. "I do, yes." "In what field?" David hesitated. The honest answer would be complicated to explain at that moment. "Administration," he replied, which technically wasn't a lie. "Oh, how nice," Jessica said, though her tone suggested she didn't quite believe him. Michael joined the conversation, clearly curious. "And what occasion are you shopping for a suit?" "For work," David answered simply. "Must be an important job," Michael remarked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, "to need a $3,000 suit." The insinuation was obvious. David felt irritation rising but kept his composure. Over the years, he'd learned that reacting angrily in these situations only made things worse. "Could I have a glass of water, please?" he asked. Jessica and Michael exchanged another glance. After a few seconds of hesitation, Jessica went to fetch the water. She returned with a slightly crumpled disposable plastic cup, clearly different from the glass tumblers David had seen offered to other customers. "Thank you," he said, drinking the water without commenting on the cup. Meanwhile, another customer entered the store, a man around 50, well-dressed, heading straight for the men's section. Immediately, Michael abandoned David and approached the new customer with a broad smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How may I assist you today?" David observed the stark contrast in service. The new customer was treated with full courtesy and attention, guided through the finest pieces in the collection. Michael explained fabrics, cuts, and origins in detail, even offering a special coffee David hadn't known was available in the store. The difference in treatment was so glaring that other customers began whispering among themselves. David caught fragments of conversations about discrimination and unfair treatment, but he chose not to react. Instead, he continued taking notes in his notebook. He recorded the timing, the attitudes, the exact words used by the sales associates. Every detail mattered. After about an hour in the store, David walked back to the counter where Jessica was organizing some papers. "I'd like to speak to the manager, please." Jessica looked up from the papers, clearly annoyed. "The manager is in a very important meeting. He can't be disturbed." "It's urgent." "Sir, I've already explained he can't be interrupted. Maybe you should come back another day." David nodded slowly, but instead of leaving, he walked over to a small sofa near the fitting rooms and sat down. He continued making notes, watching every move the salespeople made. Jessica and Michael were visibly uncomfortable with his lingering presence. They whispered to each other, glancing in David's direction. "How much longer is he going to stay there?" Michael asked quietly. "I have no idea. It's making me nervous." "Do you think he's planning something?" "I don't know. We'd better keep an eye on him." David overheard the conversation but kept writing calmly. After a few more minutes, he picked up his phone and made a quick call. "Hi, it's me. I'm done with the visit here. You can come pick up the reports." "Yes, everything's documented. See you soon." Jessica and Michael were puzzled by the call, but couldn't fully understand what David had said. 15 more minutes passed. The store had gotten busier, with several customers coming and going. David noticed the same pattern repeating. Well-dressed customers received VIP treatment, while those who looked more modest were treated coldly or even ignored. A particularly shocking moment happened when a young mother entered the store looking for something for a job interview. She explained she had saved for months to buy a special blouse, but Jessica immediately directed her to the clearance section without even asking what she really wanted. David noted everything in his notebook. Finally, after nearly 2 hours in the store, he stood up and walked back to the counter. Jessica saw him approaching and sighed dramatically. "You're still here? I'd like to speak to the manager now, please. I've already told you he's busy." David smiled calmly and picked up his phone again. All right, I'll make a call then. He dialed a number and waited a few seconds. Hi, it's me again. Can the manager come to store 23, please? It's important. Yes, now, thank you. Jessica and Michael exchanged confused glances. Who was this man who seemed to have direct access to the manager? Who did you just call? Jessica asked, trying to hide her anxiety. You'll find out soon, David replied calmly. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. 5 minutes later, a woman in her 40s hurried into the store. She was elegant, well-dressed, and carried an executive briefcase. Jessica and Michael recognized her immediately. It was Jennifer Wilson, the regional manager of the store chain. Good afternoon, Jennifer, Jessica said, surprised. We didn't know you were coming today. Jennifer completely ignored the salespeople and walked straight to David, who was still standing near the counter. Mr. Thompson, she said with a respectful tone Jessica and Michael had never heard before. How was the visit? David smiled slightly. Very enlightening, Jennifer. Very enlightening indeed. Jessica felt the blood drain from her face. Michael turned pale. Who was this man the regional manager treated with such respect? May I see your reports? Jennifer asked. David opened his notebook and showed her his notes. As Jennifer read, her expression grew increasingly serious. I understand, she finally said. Jessica, Michael, could you come with me, please? We need to talk. Jennifer, I can explain, Jessica began. In the meeting room, now. The three of them headed to the back of the store, leaving David alone in the main area. He took the opportunity to observe the decor, the arrangement of the merchandise, the details he had noted in his observations. Approximately 15 minutes later, Jennifer returned alone. Her expression was serious. Mr. Thompson, may I speak with you privately? Of course, they headed to the same room where Jessica and Michael had been. The two salespeople were seated at the table, visibly shaken. Jessica, Michael, Jennifer said, I'd like you to officially meet Mr. David Thompson. He is the new owner of the entire store chain. The silence that followed was deafening. Jessica felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. Michael sat frozen, processing the information. Impossible, Jessica murmured. David pulled an official document from his backpack and placed it on the table. It was the purchase agreement for the chain, signed 3 months prior. I acquired the company in April, he explained calmly. And since then I've been visiting every branch to understand how they operate. Michael swallowed hard. You were testing us? Not exactly testing. I was observing. I wanted to see how you treat different kinds of customers. Jessica began to cry. Mr. Thompson, we didn't know. And if you had known, would the treatment have been different? David asked. The question hung in the air. Jessica and Michael didn't know how to respond. David opened his notebook again. You offered me water in a crumpled disposable cup. For other customers, I saw glass goblets being served. You told me the fitting room was under maintenance, but other customers used it just fine. You suggested I look at other stores because this section was for special customers. You questioned my financial ability. You followed me around the store as if I were going to steal something. Each word was like a punch to the gut for the two salespeople. Mr. Thompson, Michael tried, we have quotas, pressure to sell. Sometimes you judge people by their appearance, David finished. We didn't mean to discriminate, Jessica said through tears. It's just that customers who look more modest rarely buy. We don't want to waste time when we have targets to meet. David nodded slowly. I see. And do you think that justifies how you treated me? No, Michael admitted. It doesn't. David leaned back in his chair and studied the two young people before him. He could see the fear in their eyes, the genuine regret, but also the confusion about what would happen next. Let me tell you a story, he said. When I was your age, I worked as a janitor in department stores. I wore a simple uniform, entered through service doors, and was invisible to most people. Jessica and Michael listened in silence. Many times when I was off the clock, I went into stores like this one. And you know what happened? Exactly what you did to me today. I was followed, questioned, humiliated. David paused, letting the words sink in. In those moments, I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to change things, I would. And now I have that chance. Are you going to fire us? Jessica asked, her voice trembling. That is a possibility, David admitted. You discriminated against a customer based on prejudice. That's unacceptable. Michael lowered his head. But, David continued, I believe people can change. They can learn. The question is, do you truly want to change? Yes, Jessica said immediately. I want to change. I don't want to be someone who makes others feel bad. Neither do I, Michael agreed. Today, I felt terrible seeing how we treated you. That's not who I wanted to be. David studied the faces of the two young people. He could see their regret was genuine, but he knew regret alone wasn't enough. I'll make you an offer, he finally said. Jessica and Michael looked up, hopeful. You'll work for a month in our social project. We have a community store that serves low-income individuals, offering affordable clothing for job interviews, important ceremonies, and special events. Social project, Michael asked. Yes. There you'll help people who truly need it. You'll understand the impact clothing can have on someone's life. You'll learn to value every customer, no matter their appearance or financial situation. Jessica wiped her tears. And after the month. Then we'll evaluate whether you've truly changed. If so, you'll return here with a new perspective. If not, well, then you'll be let go. Jennifer, who had remained silent, finally spoke. That's a very generous offer, considering what happened. We believe in the possibility of transformation, David explained, but it has to be genuine. Jessica and Michael exchanged glances. The offer was better than they'd expected, but it also represented a huge challenge. We accept, Jessica said. I accept too, Michael agreed. David nodded. Good. You start on Monday. Your salary will remain, but there'll be no commissions during this time. It's a chance to learn, not to profit. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, back to the story. By the end of that week, Jessica and Michael arrived at the community store, located in a more modest part of the city. The contrast with the mall boutique was striking. The space was smaller, simpler, but had a warmth they hadn't expected. They were greeted by Mrs. Eleanor, a 68-year-old woman who had coordinated the social project for 5 years. Her grey hair was tied in a simple bun, and her smile radiated kindness. So, you're the new volunteers, she said, studying Jessica and Michael with curiosity. David told me about you. Jessica felt uneasy, wondering exactly what David had shared. Mrs. Eleanor, we made serious mistakes. We're here to learn. We all make mistakes, dear, Mrs. Eleanor replied gently. What matters is being willing to grow. During their first week, Jessica and Michael watched how Mrs. Eleanor and the other volunteers worked. Every customer was welcomed with genuine care, no matter their circumstances. There were single mothers looking for interview outfits, young people needing graduation attire, seniors searching for something special for their grandchildren's weddings. The first customer Jessica helped on her own was Margaret, a 52-year-old woman who had been laid off after 15 years at the same job. I need something nice for interviews, Margaret explained, but I can't spend much. Jessica felt an immediate connection to the woman's distress. Instead of just showing her a few items, she talked with Margaret about the kind of work she was seeking, her preferred style, and which colors made her feel more confident. You have beautiful eyes, Jessica remarked. This blue blouse will really bring them out. Margaret smiled for the first time since arriving. It's been a while since someone gave me a compliment like that. When Margaret left the store, carrying not just the blouse but also a perfectly matching pair of pants and even a necklace Jessica had suggested, she was beaming. Thank you, dear. You made me feel beautiful again. Jessica felt an emotion she had never experienced before in the mall boutique. It was a deep, genuine satisfaction that had nothing to do with commissions or sales targets. Michael had a similar experience when he helped Jason, a 22-year-old who had just landed his first formal job and needed a suit for his presentation. I've never worn a suit in my life, Jason admitted, clearly uncomfortable. I don't even know how to choose one. Instead of rushing or judging, Michael spent nearly 2 hours helping Jason. He explained cuts, measurements, how to match colors, even how to tie a tie. "Man, you look like an executive," Michael said when Jason looked at himself in the mirror. The young man's eyes filled with tears. "My mum won't believe it when she sees me like this." That night, Michael called Jessica. "Did you feel something different today?" "I did," she replied. "It's like I'm finally helping someone for real." "Exactly. At the boutique, I only thought about how much I'd earn from each sale. Here, I just think about how I can help the person feel better." By the second week, they began to understand the stories behind each customer better. There was Dorothy, a 70-year-old woman who needed a dress for her granddaughter's wedding. She had saved for months for this special occasion. "It's the first wedding in the family," she told Jessica. "I want to look beautiful for the pictures." Jessica spent the whole afternoon with Dorothy, trying on different dresses, helping with accessories, even teaching her some makeup tips. When the older woman left, she was moved. "You have a heart of gold, dear," she said to Jessica. "May God bless you." There was also David, not the owner, but a 40-year-old man with the same name, who had been unemployed for 8 months and finally landed an interview for a supervisor position. "This is my last chance," he told Michael. "If I don't get this job, I'll have to go back to my hometown." Michael not only helped him pick the perfect outfit, but also talked to him about posture, confidence, and how to present himself in the interview. A week later, David returned to the store, beaming. "I got the job," he announced, "and my boss said I made a great impression in the interview." Michael felt a joy he had never experienced before. By the end of the third week, Jessica and Michael had become integral parts of the social project team. They had formed real connections with the customers, understood their life stories, and shared important moments in their lives. Mrs. Eleanor watched them with approval. "You've both changed so much since you arrived," she remarked. "At first you seemed lost. Now I see genuine passion in what you do." "Mrs. Eleanor," Jessica said, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, dear. How did you start working here?" Mrs. Eleanor smiled warmly. "My story is like many of the customers here. When my husband passed, I was in a very tough financial spot. I had to look for work at 60, with no professional experience. No one wanted to hire me." Jessica and Michael listened intently. "One day I walked into a store looking for something cheap for an interview. The saleswoman treated me so poorly that I left humiliated. I swore that if I ever got the chance, I'd do things differently." "And you got the chance," Michael observed. "When David started this project, I was one of the first to volunteer. I wanted to make sure no one else went through the humiliation I did." Mrs. Eleanor's story deeply touched Jessica and Michael. They began to realize that their behavior at the boutique wasn't just bad in an abstract way. It had caused real harm to real people. During the fourth week, something unexpected happened. Margaret, the woman Jessica had helped in her first week, returned to the store. "Jessica," she called out excitedly, "I got the job." "Margaret, that's wonderful. And you know what my boss said? That I presented myself very well in the interview, that my professionalism showed in how I dressed." Jessica was moved. "You deserved this opportunity." "No, my dear." Margaret took Jessica's hands. "It was you who gave me confidence. It was you who made me believe I still had value." That night, Jessica cried, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude for discovering a purpose she never knew existed. Jason, the young man Michael had helped with his first suit, also returned with good news. "Man, you won't believe it," he told Michael. "I got promoted. My boss said I demonstrate exceptional professionalism." "That's amazing, Jason. And I brought something for you." Jason handed over an envelope. "It's the money I saved to pay the full price of the suit. I know the prices here are symbolic, but I want to help others have the same opportunity I did." Michael was touched by the gesture. "Jason, you don't have to." "Yes, I do. You changed my life. This money can change someone else's life too." At the end of the month, David Thompson returned to check on Jessica and Michael's progress. He arrived with Jennifer and a surprise, the man who had tried to intervene in the boutique on the day of the initial humiliation. This is Dr. Richard, David introduced. He's our advisor and one of the investors in the social project. Dr. Richard smiled warmly. I was at the boutique the day of the incident, he explained. I was very impressed with how David handled the situation, and now I'm curious to see how you've grown. Mrs. Eleanor made sure to show David the monthly reports. Jessica and Michael hadn't just fulfilled their responsibilities, they had created their own initiatives to improve service. Jessica set up a client follow-up system, Mrs. Eleanor explained. She calls to see if they got the jobs, if they need anything else. And Michael organized a workshop on personal presentation, she continued. He teaches men how to dress for different occasions. David listened carefully. And how do you feel about this experience? He asked Jessica and Michael directly. Mr. Thompson, Jessica replied, this month has completely changed my life. I've discovered a way of working that goes far beyond just making money. There's a chance to truly impact people's lives in a positive way. I agree with Jessica, Michael said. I've learned that every client has a story, dreams, real needs. When you genuinely care about the person, the work becomes something much bigger. David nodded, clearly satisfied with their answers. Dr. Richard, what are your thoughts? The older man smiled. David, when you told me about this experiment, I admit I had doubts it would work. But seeing these two young people now, I see real transformation. It's not just regret for what they did, it's genuine growth. Jennifer, what about you? I've been following the reports every week, she said. Their change is evident, and more importantly, the clients have noticed. We've received exceptional feedback about the service they've provided. David turned back to Jessica and Michael. Would you like to return to the boutique? The two exchanged glances. It was a question they had discussed many times over the month. Mr. Thompson, Jessica said, we'd like to go back, but not the same way we were before. What do you mean? We want to take what we've learned here back there. We want to change the culture of the boutique. We want all customers to feel welcome, regardless of their appearance or financial situation. Michael agreed. We've learned that respect and dignity are priceless, and that good service is good for everyone, for the customer, the salesperson, and the company. David smiled. It was exactly the answer he had hoped to hear. Very well. You're both promoted. Promoted? Jessica asked, surprised. Yes. You won't be returning as sales associates. You'll come back as customer service supervisors. Your responsibility will be to train the entire team to provide the same level of service you've learned to give here. Michael was speechless. Mr. Thompson, we don't know how to thank you. Thank me by doing an excellent job and by spreading this new culture across all our stores. Dr. Richard stepped forward. Young people, you've gone through what I call heart education. You didn't just learn new techniques, you learned to see people differently. That's very rare and very valuable. Mrs. Eleanor, who had been listening to the whole conversation, was moved. You'll always be welcome here, she said. I hope you never forget the lessons you've learned. We'll never forget, Mrs. Eleanor, Jessica assured her. You and all the customers here taught us more in 1 month than we learned in years. A week later, Jessica and Michael returned to the boutique at the mall. But now everything was different. They arrived with a new mission and a new perspective. The first thing they did was gather the entire store team. We're going to implement some important changes, Jessica announced. From now on, every customer who walks into this store will be treated with the same respect and attention. It doesn't matter how they're dressed, what car they drive, or how much money they seem to have, Michael added. Everyone deserves to be treated well. Some sales associates were skeptical. But what about our targets? Asked Emily, a sales associate who had worked there for 2 years. If we waste time on customers who don't buy, how will we meet our numbers? Jessica smiled. Emily, we discovered something amazing. When you treat everyone well, your sales actually increase. Satisfied customers recommend the store to others. People who feel respected come back, and you never know who might become a valuable client. To prove the point, Michael shared the story of a man he'd met at the social project. He was unemployed, dressed in very simple clothes. In any other store, he'd probably have been ignored. But when he got a job, he came back to thank us. And guess what we found out? He was a purchasing manager for a major company. Now he recommends our store to all his employees. The team began to understand the logic. Jessica and Michael implemented a comprehensive training program. For 2 weeks, every sales associate spent time at the social project, experiencing the same transformative journey they had. The changes were gradual but steady. The sales team learned to ask the right questions, to listen to customers' real needs, and to offer genuine solutions instead of just pushing expensive products. 3 months later, the results were clear. The store had become known for its exceptional service. Customers who once felt intimidated by the atmosphere now felt comfortable coming in and browsing. One of the most touching moments happened when Margaret herself walked into the boutique. She had gotten a promotion at her new job and wanted to buy something special to celebrate. Jessica recognized her immediately. "Margaret, how wonderful to see you here." "Jessica, dear, I'm so happy to run into you. I want to buy something beautiful to celebrate my promotion." Jessica guided her through the store with the same warmth she had shown at the social project. Margaret tried on several outfits, all within her current price range, which was now considerably higher. When she left the store, carrying her purchases and beaming with happiness, other customers present remarked on the extraordinary service they had witnessed. "This is how all stores should be," commented one lady. "I've never seen such attentive salespeople," agreed another customer. The boutique's transformation didn't go unnoticed by the mall's management. The general manager came personally to congratulate David on the change in the store's culture. "Mr. Thompson, I don't know what you did, but this store has become an example for all the others. Customers constantly praise the service." David smiled. "We simply reminded our employees that we're in the business of serving people, not just selling products." 6 months after the transformation, Jessica and Michael received an even bigger offer. David wanted them to take charge of customer service training across the entire store chain. "You've experienced the complete transformation," he explained. "From prejudice to understanding, from discrimination to inclusion, you're the perfect people to teach others how to make the same journey." Jessica was moved by the offer. "Mr. Thompson, when you gave me that second chance, I never imagined I'd come this far. And I never imagined I'd become a better person through my work," Michael added. They enthusiastically accepted the new responsibility. Over the next year, they traveled across the country, visiting stores in the chain and implementing the cultural transformation program. Each store had its own particularities, its specific challenges, but the core lesson was always the same: to see every customer as a unique individual with their own story, deserving of respect and dignity. In a store in Chicago, they encountered a situation similar to what they had experienced: salespeople discriminating against customers based on appearance. But now, instead of being the ones discriminating, Jessica and Michael were the agents of change. "Do you know why we're here?" Jessica asked the team during the first training session. "To improve sales?" suggested one salesperson. "No," Michael replied. "We're here to remind you of something you may have forgotten. Every person who walks into this store is a complex human being with dreams, fears, hopes, and unique stories. They shared their own story, how they had discriminated against David, how they had been confronted with their own attitudes, how they had gone through the transformation process. At first we thought we were being punished," Jessica explained, "but we realized we were being educated, and that education changed our lives forever." The program spread throughout the chain. In less than 2 years, the company had become a national benchmark for customer service. Other chains began approaching David to understand the secret behind their transformation. "There's no secret," he always responded, "just the decision to treat everyone with dignity." Jessica and Michael became recognized speakers, sharing their experiences at universities, conferences, and sales seminars. They always began their presentations the same way: "We're going to tell you about the day we humiliated our own boss and how it changed our lives forever." The story always made an impact. Many salespeople related to the mistakes they had made. Others were inspired by the possibility of change. But the most special moment came 3 years after the initial incident. David organized a special event to celebrate the results of the cultural transformation program. He gathered hundreds of employees from across the chain, customers who had been positively impacted by the changes, and even people from the social project that had benefited over the years. Mrs. Eleanor, now 71 years old, was one of the honored guests. "This old heart is happy to see how small seeds of kindness can grow into an entire forest," she said in her speech. Margaret was also present, now a manager at her company and a loyal customer of the chain. "Jessica taught me I had value even before I got my job," she said, "and that lesson changed how I see myself and how I treat others." Jason, the young man Michael had helped with his first suit, was now a supervisor at his company and brought his entire team to visit the store. "Michael didn't just help me with clothes," he shared. "He taught me about confidence, self-respect, and how to treat people well." During the event, David gave an emotional speech. 3 years ago, I walked into a store as a test. I wanted to understand if my employees shared the values I considered important. What I discovered deeply disappointed me." He paused, looking at Jessica and Michael in the audience. "But I also discovered something wonderful. People can change, they can grow, they can become better versions of themselves when given guidance, opportunity, and, most importantly, when they understand the real impact of their actions." "Jessica and Michael didn't just change," he continued. "They became agents of change. Today, hundreds of employees have gone through the same transformation program they experienced. Thousands of customers are treated with dignity every day because of the lessons that started with a mistake." The audience applauded emotionally. "But the most important lesson," David concluded, "is that a company's true wealth isn't in the products it sells or the profits it makes. It's in the ability to make people feel valued, respected, and worthy." After the event, Jessica, Michael, and David spoke privately. "Mr. Thompson," Jessica said, "thank you for giving us a second chance." "Thank you for not firing us when we deserved to be fired," Michael added. David smiled. "You know, when I decided to give that second chance, it wasn't just out of kindness, it was out of conviction. I believed you could be better, and you proved me right." "But what if we hadn't changed?" Jessica asked. "Then I would have learned a different lesson," David replied. "But I believe when people are given a real opportunity to grow, they rarely waste it." Years passed. The retail chain continued growing, always upholding the values of respect and dignity in service. Jessica became the company's director of human development. Michael took over as regional manager, overseeing the program's implementation in new branches. The social project also expanded. Now there were 5 community stores in different cities, serving thousands of people every year. Mrs. Eleanor, even retired, still visited regularly, always with her warm smile and wise advice. One Friday afternoon, 5 years after the initial incident, David received a call that moved him deeply. "Mr. Thompson, it's Jason. Remember me?" "Of course, Jason. How are you?" "I'm great, sir. Actually, I'm calling to share some news. I've started my own consulting firm." "And guess what the first value of my company is?" David smiled, anticipating the answer. "To treat everyone with respect and dignity. I learned that from Michael years ago and I never forgot." "That's wonderful, Jason. I'm sure you'll be very successful." "Mr. Thompson, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you give Jessica and Michael a second chance? Why didn't you just fire them?" David thought for a moment before answering. "Jason, I've learned there are 2 kinds of people who make mistakes. Those who make mistakes out of ill will, and those who make mistakes out of lack of understanding. Jessica and Michael weren't bad people. They were people who hadn't had the chance to grasp the impact of their actions. And how did you know the difference? By the genuine remorse I saw in their eyes, and by their willingness to learn and change. When someone is truly willing to grow, they're worth investing in." After the call, David reflected on the journey they had all taken. What had started as a disappointing test had turned into one of the most rewarding experiences of his professional life. He thought of all the people who had been impacted by the transformation, the employees who had learned new values, the customers who felt respected, the people from the social project who had received support at crucial moments in their lives. But most of all, he thought of Jessica and Michael, who had transformed from people who caused pain into people who brought joy. That night, before bed, David wrote in his personal journal. Today marks 5 years since the day I was humiliated in my own store. At the time, that experience was painful and disappointing, but now I realize it was one of life's greatest gifts. It taught me that real change is possible, that people can grow, and that sometimes a moment of crisis can be the start of something wonderful. Jessica and Michael taught me that it's worth believing in the human capacity for transformation, and for that, I am eternally grateful. The next day, David made an important decision. He would expand the transformation program beyond his own company. He would create a foundation dedicated to teaching values of respect and dignity in customer service across businesses nationwide. Jessica and Michael would be the foundation's first instructors, sharing their story and lessons with thousands of others. We want to impact an entire generation of sales professionals, David explained when he presented the idea to them. We want what happened with us to become the exception, not the rule. Mr. Thompson, Jessica said, tears in her eyes, when I think of the person I was 5 years ago, I feel ashamed. But when I think of the person I've become, I feel proud. And all of that is thanks to you. No, Jessica, David corrected. Thanks to you. I just opened the door. You were the one who chose to walk through it. The Respect and Dignity Foundation launched at the end of that year. In its first year of operation, it trained over 1,000 sales professionals across 50 different companies. Every training session began with Jessica and Michael telling their story, how they had discriminated against a customer, how they discovered he was the owner of the company, how they were given a second chance, and how that chance transformed their lives. The question isn't whether you've made mistakes before, Michael always said. We all have. The question is, are you willing to learn and change? The answer was always yes. And the transformations kept happening, one person at a time, one company at a time. 10 years after the initial incident, David was invited to give a lecture at a university on leadership and organizational transformation. During the talk, a student raised his hand. Professor David, do you really believe everyone can change? David smiled, remembering the same doubt he'd had years before. Young man, I believe the vast majority of people can change, yes, but there are 2 fundamental conditions. They must genuinely want to change, and they must have the opportunity and support to make that change. And if someone doesn't want to change, then there's not much we can do. Real change has to come from within, but my experience has taught me that when we provide the right environment and the right example, most people choose to grow. He paused and looked at the audience of young students. You who are starting your careers have a unique opportunity. You can choose to be agents of change from the very beginning. You don't have to wait to make mistakes to learn how to treat people with dignity. After the lecture, several students came up to talk. One young woman especially caught David's attention. Professor, I work part-time at a clothing store. I admit I sometimes judge customers by their appearance. Your story really made me think. What's your name? Ashley. Ashley, may I give you some advice? Of course. The next time a customer walks into your store, try to look beyond their appearance. Try to imagine what story they carry, what dreams they have, what challenges they're facing. Every person you help is an opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. I'll try, Professor. I promise. 6 months later, David received an email from Ashley. Professor David, I wanted to thank you for the advice you gave me after your lecture. I started applying what you said at work. Now, I'm known in the store for my caring service, and I've received many compliments from customers. More importantly, I feel much better about myself. I've discovered that making others happy makes me happy too. Thank you for planting that seed in me. David smiled as he read the email. It was further proof that small actions can lead to big transformations. 15 years had passed since that day in the boutique. David, now 57, decided to write a book telling the whole story. The title would be The Second Chance: How a Bad Day Became the Best Lesson of My Life. Jessica, now the National Director of the Respect and Dignity Foundation, wrote the foreword. This book tells the story of how 2 people who made mistakes were given the chance to make things right. But more importantly, it tells the story of a leader who chose to believe in the human capacity for change. David Thompson could have fired us and forgotten the incident. Instead, he invested in us, believed in us, and taught us that it's possible to become a better version of yourself. This isn't just our story, it's the story of anyone willing to grow, learn, and change. Michael wrote the epilogue. When I walked into that boutique 15 years ago, I thought I was a good salesman. I had good commissions, hit my targets, and was respected by my colleagues. But I wasn't a good person. I didn't understand that my job wasn't just to sell products, it was to serve people. David taught me that professional success without humanity isn't real success. Now, when I train new salespeople, I always say, you're not just selling clothes, you're selling dignity, respect, and self-worth. Do it well. The book became a national bestseller. Companies across the country began adopting the principles of the Respect and Dignity Foundation. The impact spread far beyond the retail sector. But perhaps the most special moment was when Mrs. Eleanor, now 80 years old, was honored as Person of the Year by the National Retail Association. In her acceptance speech, she said, "My dears, when I started working on the social project, I just wanted to help a few people going through the same struggles I had faced. I never imagined that small effort would become part of such a big movement. Today, when I see thousands of people being treated with dignity in stores across the country, my heart fills with joy, because I've learned that when we plant seeds of kindness, they always grow and multiply." That evening, after the ceremony, David, Jessica, Michael, and Mrs. Eleanor had dinner together. It was a moment of celebration, but also of reflection. "Do you think we've really changed anything?" Jessica asked. "Of course we have," Mrs. Eleanor replied. "Every person who's been treated well in a store these past years represents real change." "But is it enough?" Michael questioned. "There's still so much prejudice, so much discrimination." David thought for a moment before answering. "Michael, real social change doesn't happen overnight. It happens one person at a time, one business at a time, one story at a time. We've done our part, and every person you've trained will do theirs, and so on." "It's like a stone thrown into water," Mrs. Eleanor added. The ripples spread farther and farther. 20 years after the initial incident, Jessica and Michael were invited to a special meeting with David. He had made an important decision. "I want you both to take full leadership of the company and the foundation," he announced. "It's time for me to retire and let you carry this forward." "Mr. David," Jessica said. She had stopped calling him Mr. Thompson years ago at his request. "We don't know if we're ready for such a big responsibility." "You're more than ready," David smiled. "You started as people who discriminated. You became people who welcome. You've grown into leaders who inspire change. I don't know anyone more qualified to continue this work." Michael was moved. "David, how can we ever repay you for everything you've done for us? Keep doing what you're already doing. Keep believing people can change. Keep giving second chances. Keep planting seeds of kindness. And never forget," he concluded, "where you came from and how far you've come. That journey of transformation is the greatest gift you can give others." On the day of his retirement, David made one last visit to the boutique where it had all begun. The store was unrecognizable. Instead of the cold, elitist atmosphere of before, there was now a welcoming space where people of all ages and backgrounds felt comfortable. He discreetly watched the sales associates assisting customers, every interaction marked by respect, genuine attention, and care. It was exactly the vision he had dreamed of years ago. A young sales associate approached. "Can I help you, sir?" David smiled. The young man didn't recognize him, but treated him with the same warmth he offered every other customer. "Actually, I was just observing. You all do wonderful work here." "Thank you, sir. We've learned that every customer is special and deserves our best service." "And who taught you that?" "Our director, Jessica, and our regional manager, Michael. They always tell the story of how they learned that lesson years ago. It's an incredible story of transformation." David nodded, his heart full of pride. "Yes, it truly is an incredible story." As he left the store, David reflected on everything that had happened. What had begun as a moment of disappointment had become the most rewarding experience of his life. He had learned that giving second chances wasn't just an act of kindness, It was an investment in the human capacity to grow and change, and that investment had borne fruit beyond anything he could have imagined. Jessica and Michael had not only become better professionals, but better people, and they, in turn, had inspired thousands of others to embark on the same journey of transformation. The most important lesson, David realized, wasn't about sales or customer service. It was about the power of human redemption, about the ability we all have to become better versions of ourselves when given guidance, opportunity, and, most of all, when someone believes in us. That night, in his journal, David wrote his final reflections on the journey. "Today, I officially close my business career, but I do not end my life's mission. I've learned that leading isn't just about running a company, it's about inspiring people to become their best selves. Jessica and Michael taught me that it's never too late to change, never too late to grow, never too late to become better people, and for that, I am eternally grateful to them." End of story. And what about you, dear listener? What did you think of this journey of transformation? Do you believe people can truly change when given a second chance? Share your thoughts with us about this story of overcoming challenges and personal growth. If this narrative touched your heart, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other inspiring stories about the human capacity for change and redemption.